Few people chase their dreams with the reckless abandon of Maggie. From a young age, she was convinced that anything she wanted was hers for the taking. With a flick of her wrist, high school boys would carry her backpack, and lovesick admirers would race across town to grab her favorite ice cream from the local Dairy Queen. Maggie, petite and stunning, had a knack for bending the world to her will. Her mother, Nancy Thompson, couldn't figure out where Maggie got her high and mighty attitude. Nancy was a down-to-earth woman, clocking long hours at a chicken processing plant in rural Springdale, Arkansas. The grueling work left her drained, and she'd often collapse into bed still in her work clothes, too tired to change. Raising Maggie alone was tough. Time and energy were luxuries she didn't have. Maggie's father had passed away from a heart attack when she was little, leaving her with just her grandmother, Dorothy Jean, as a constant presence. Dorothy, whose family claimed distant ties to old Southern gentry, fancied herself a bit like Scarlett O'Hara. Despite her age and occasional confusion, she devoured romance novels and passed that passion on to Maggie. The young girl soaked up tales of grand ladies, imagining herself as a glamorous socialite. Over time, those fantasies twisted her into someone demanding, with a shaky moral compass. By her 20s, Maggie had men wrapped around her finger, but Springdale's dating pool was a letdown. Half the guys were drunks, the other half just didn't measure up to her standards. "You need to stop this nonsense, Maggie," Nancy would plead. "You'll end up alone if you keep chasing pipe dreams. Beauty fades fast, honey." "And where am I supposed to find a decent guy around here?" Maggie snapped. "All I see are losers." "What about Tommy?" Nancy suggested. "He's been following you like a puppy for years. He's got a good heart, Maggie. He loves you." Maggie wrinkled her nose, tossing her hair. "Tommy? That septic tank cleaner? Mom, I'm not cut out for a life scraping by. I'd rather snag a couple of rich guys and live the high life." "Watch yourself, girl," Nancy warned, her voice heavy. "Messing around with married men for fancy clothes will only bring trouble." "Married, single, what's the difference?" Maggie smirked. "Take Owen, for example. He's a bit older, sure, but he's got 3 thrift stores and a couple of auto shops out by the highway. That's the kind of man I'm talking about, not Tommy." Nancy sighed, knowing her daughter was set on a dangerous path, chasing dreams that might burn her in the end. Maggie's dreams were bigger than Springdale could hold. While Nancy begged her to settle down and find a steady job, Maggie had other plans. Her mind was set on Owen, the married businessman with thrift stores and auto shops. She promised her mom she'd get her act together, but it was just talk to keep Nancy off her back. "I'll make something of myself, Mom," Maggie said, her voice dripping with confidence. "You'll see." The next morning, Maggie packed a suitcase, hugged Nancy goodbye, and claimed she was off to build a new life in Fayetteville, the nearest big city. Nancy, her eyes misty, handed her a small wad of cash and a packed lunch. "Go chase your dreams, sweetheart," Nancy whispered, tracing a cross on Maggie's forehead. "Just don't let them clip your wings too soon." Maggie didn't look back as she boarded the bus. Work wasn't on her agenda. She went straight to Owen. He was nervous, glancing over his shoulder like someone might spot them. Fooling around in Springdale was one thing, but Fayetteville was too close to his wife, Linda. Still, Maggie had a way of melting men's defenses. Before long, Owen was hooked, renting her a sleek downtown apartment and covering her every expense. Their fling ignited into a full-blown romance. Nights were filled with passion, and Maggie, who'd first seen Owen as a meal ticket, started to feel something deeper. Owen, meanwhile, couldn't get enough of his young, vibrant girlfriend. "Linda won't miss a thing if I have some fun with a girl like you," Owen muttered to himself, convincing himself it was harmless. But Maggie dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. Owen's face went pale. "What were you thinking, Maggie?" he snapped, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'm opening a new store, and every penny's tied up. Linda controls the checkbook, and she's got me on a leash. A kid's the last thing I need. We'll scrape together enough for an abortion, don't worry." Maggie's blood boiled. She wanted to scream, but instead she smiled tightly, already plotting. Revenge, she decided, would be served ice cold. Pretending to play along as Owen's kept woman, She secretly recorded him bad-mouthing Linda and complaining about his marriage. The audio was dynamite, and Maggie knew it. She showed Owen a snippet of the recording. His eyes widened in panic. "You little snake," he hissed, but he paid her a hefty sum to keep it quiet. Maggie wasn't done. Strutting into Linda's office at the thrift store chain's headquarters, she tossed a USB drive onto the desk. "What's this?" Linda asked, her sharp eyes narrowing. She was in her 60s, her face lined like weathered leather. "A little something about your husband," Maggie said with a sly grin. "Half the recording's on there. The juicy stuff's on another drive. Name your price." Linda listened, her jaw tightening, then slid a notepad across the desk. "Write your number," she said coolly. Maggie scribbled a figure with 5 zeros. Linda crossed out one, offering a lower but still massive sum. Maggie took the deal, handed over the drive, and walked out with a fat check. Days later, word spread that Owen was out of the business, now selling homemade jams at a roadside stand. Maggie's schemes had paid off, but even she had a line she wouldn't cross. Despite her cold-hearted hustle with Owen, she couldn't bring herself to end her pregnancy. After a smooth delivery, she welcomed a healthy boy named Noah. But motherhood wasn't in Maggie's plans. She drove back to Springdale, handed Noah to Nancy, and slipped her a stack of cash from the blackmail money. "Here, Mum, for diapers and baby stuff," Maggie said, her tone flat, avoiding Nancy's gaze. "You're leaving already?" Nancy asked, cradling Noah, her voice trembling. "Stay a bit, Maggie. Have some coffee. Tell me about his father." "No father, Mum. Just me. I've got things to sort out, but I'll be back soon," Maggie replied, already halfway out the door. Nancy's heart sank. She knew her daughter was a free spirit, always chasing the next big thing. With a sigh, she rocked Noah, vowing to give him the love Maggie couldn't. Maggie didn't look back. She caught a bus to Little Rock, Arkansas's bustling capital, determined to climb higher. She landed a waitress job at a swanky downtown steakhouse, the kind of place where men in tailored suits flashed platinum cards. Maggie knew her prey, rich older guys with deep pockets. She worked the room, all smiles and flirty glances, waiting for the right mark. One evening, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a sharp suit ordered a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet. Maggie sized him up, expensive watch, polished shoes. This was her shot. Carrying the wine to his table, she accidentally splashed some on his crisp white shirt. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," Maggie gasped, her eyes wide with fake panic. "I'm such a klutz." "No harm done," the man chuckled, dabbing his shirt. "It'll wash out. I'll toss it in the laundry tonight." "You don't have a housekeeper?" Maggie asked, tilting her head. "I used to clean houses back in my last job. I'm kind of a neat freak." The man's eyes twinkled. "Well, how about working for me? Name's Edward Sullivan. Pays better than this place and I tip well," he said, winking. "I'm in," Maggie beamed. "When do I start, Edward?" "How about right now?" Edward laughed, his voice warm. Maggie felt the thrill of a new conquest. Edward's driver, Jake, a tall, athletic guy with a chiseled jaw, opened the door of a sleek BMW. Maggie's eyes lingered on Jake. He was her type, all rugged charm. As they drove, Edward quoted Hemingway and cracked jokes, clearly enjoying her company. Maggie laughed at every line, laying on the charm. They pulled up to a sprawling mansion nestled in a pine grove outside Little Rock. Inside, marble floors gleamed and abstract art lined the walls. Maggie's jaw dropped. This was wealth on another level. "You're home, dear," a frail voice called from the hall. "Yes, Clara," Edward replied. "This is Maggie, our new housekeeper." Clara, Edward's ailing wife, nodded weakly. Maggie smiled politely, already mapping out her next play in this gilded cage. Maggie settled into Edward Sullivan's mansion, her eyes always on the prize. One night, she slipped down the hall to his study, dressed in a silky robe that hugged her curves. The excuse was flimsy, but it worked. "Edward, "Where's the washing machine?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I figured you'd need that shirt cleaned by morning." Edward's eyes lit up, his tiredness fading. At 60-something, he felt a spark he hadn't known in years. They ended up talking for hours about old movies, jazz, and his days building a real estate empire. Laundry was forgotten. From then on, Maggie became his evening companion, sharing whiskey and stories by the fireplace. Edward couldn't imagine life without her vibrant energy, even if it wasn't quite love. But Maggie saw a roadblock. Clara, Edward's frail wife. Clara's constant illnesses kept her bedridden, yet she stood between Maggie and the life she craved. Maggie had overheard the nurses mention Clara's severe allergy to a certain heart medication. One quiet night, she crept into the medicine cabinet and swapped Clara's pills for the forbidden drug, carefully matching the capsule's colors. By morning, Clara was gone, her throat swollen shut from a fatal reaction. Edward, devastated but trusting, requested no autopsy, citing Clara's age. Maggie's secret was safe. Edward grieved, but not for long. Within months, he proposed to Maggie, and she walked down the aisle in a designer gown, her smile dazzling the Little Rock elite. Her new life was a dream: private chefs, spa days, and a black Amex card with no limit. Yet, Edward's charm wore thin. His stories about golf and business deals grew stale, and Maggie found herself rolling her eyes behind his back. Her gaze wandered to Jake, the driver. Tall, with a roguish grin, he was everything Edward wasn't: young, thrilling, alive. Their stolen glances turned into secret meetups in the guest house, sparks flying under the cover of night. Maggie and Jake fit together like puzzle pieces, their chemistry undeniable. 10 years slipped by. Edward's health faded. High blood pressure, a weak heart. Maggie played the devoted wife by day, but her nights belonged to Jake. She counted the days until Edward's fortune would be hers, imagining penthouses and private jets. Then it happened. Edward passed away in his sleep, quiet and painless. At the funeral, Maggie played the grieving widow to perfection, sobbing into a silk handkerchief as mourners whispered their condolences. Her mind, though, was on the will. The reading was set for the following Tuesday, and Maggie could already taste victory. She spent the weekend picking out a sleek black dress and diamond earrings, ready to step into her new role as a millionaire's widow. Little did she know, fate had other plans. Maggie arrived at the lawyer's office in Little Rock, her heart racing with anticipation. The will reading was her moment. She'd outsmarted everyone, and Edward's fortune was surely hers. She wore a form-fitting black dress, diamond studs sparkling in her ears, and a smug smile. The notary, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and began. Maggie leaned forward, savoring every word, imagining yachts and Manhattan penthouses. Then the bombshell hit. Edward Sullivan bequeaths his entire estate to the Arkansas Cancer Research Foundation, the notary read, his voice steady. Maggie's jaw dropped. The room spun. "What foundation? That can't be right," she shouted, snatching the document to read it herself. Her hands shook as the truth sank in. Edward had left her nothing. The notary handed her a sealed envelope. "This is for you, Mrs. Sullivan, from Edward himself," he said calmly. Maggie tore it open, her pulse pounding. Inside was a single sheet, Edward's neat handwriting filling the page. "Dear Maggie, thank you for 10 years of excitement. Your beauty was a gift, and I'm passing it on to Jake, my loyal driver, who served me well. I saw the security footage, every stolen moment with him. I knew everything. Enjoy your freedom, and may you find happiness. Yours, Edward." Maggie's knees buckled. She clutched the letter, tears smearing her mascara. Edward had played her, and she'd never seen it coming. The betrayal stung worse than the empty bank account. Jake was no better. When he heard Maggie wasn't the rich widow he'd expected, he vanished without a word. He'd been in it for the same thing she was: money. Maggie saw her own greed reflected in his cold exit, and it burned. Back in Springdale, her son, Noah, was a teenager now, raised by Nancy. He barely knew Maggie's name, calling Nancy Mom and thriving in a stable home. Even Tommy, the septic tank cleaner she'd scoffed at years ago, had settled down, married, and built a quiet, happy life with his wife and kids. Maggie, though, had nothing. Her beauty had faded, her charm dulled by time and hard living. The mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, lines etching her face where confidence once shone. She wandered Little Rock's streets, replaying her choices. The men she'd used, the lies she'd spun, the son she'd abandoned, all for a dream that slipped through her fingers. Maggie had clawed her way to the top, only to fall harder than she'd ever imagined. Alone at a bus stop, she stared at the horizon, the weight of her empty life pressing down. The girl who'd once bent the world to her will was gone, left with nothing but regrets and a story no one would believe.